Welcome back to the Free Code Camp podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org, and today we are talking with MacKevin Fey. He's a experienced software engineer who just got laid off last week from his role at Microsoft. Now, I did not plan on talking about this. He just got news well after we'd scheduled this interview, so why not lean into that and talk about that experience? MacKevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Quincy.
Yeah, and we're going to talk, in addition to like the post layoff job search, we're going to talk about tips that Mack has for building your own safety net, something he and his wife have been working on for many years in terms of like diversifying your investments and all that stuff. We're going to talk about how you can use developer skills to help the people around you when you have downtime like this. And Mack maintains several different websites for friends and for his wife's speech pathology practice. And we're also going to talk about how Mack trains himself mentally and physically for the rigors of modern work. Spoiler alert, Mack has won some trail running competitions around the Portland area, so he's serious about fitness. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So let's just start by talking about the past couple weeks and what the experience has been like.
Yeah, so actually going back to maybe a month or two ago, we had heard some rumors, just kind of both internally and externally, that there might be some layoffs. So in that sense was a little bit prepared for it also. But yeah, then when it actually came, was kind of just totally blindsided. And actually the dark humor of it, in my opinion, is that, layoffs are somewhat normal. They happen every year, every couple of years. And so you always want to be kind of prepared for it. And as prepared as I was for it, the day that it happened, none of the red flags caught me. So, I'm going in, logging into work just like I usually do. And this random meeting comes up on my calendar, and it's just like business critical update. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like something like earnings just happened. Like there's probably some fun announcement that's going to happen. And then I join the meeting, and everybody's anonymous in the meeting, and my mic's muted and my camera's, shut off, not by my own. And I was like, oh, that's a little weird. But I was like, I didn't know what was happening yet. And then, my VP of the org comes onto the phone call, and they were on the verge of tears. And at that point I was like, oh no, this is what's going to happen. And, sure enough, they gave the news, and, they kind of talked through what the next steps for all of us were going to be. And then since then, about the past week, I actually haven't been I've been busy with personal stuff, but I haven't been too busy on searching for jobs, just because I wanted to take some time to kind of unplug and really, be there for my friends and family and everything. So I've been doing a lot of that stuff. Actually on Saturday, we had a 5K at the WSU Vancouver campus for my wife's nonprofit. And so that was a lot of fun. I got to, I designed the course, and I marked the course right before the race and everything. And there's a lot of other stuff at the event too, but it was all a lot of fun.
So that's a 5-kilometer trail running course?
There was a little bit of trail. It is, in my opinion, it's kind of nice that the campus is very similar to the actual WSU in Pullman. It's very, very hilly.
And when you say WSU, is that Washington State University?
Yep, yeah, Washington State. Yeah.
Okay. And you're like Portland and Vancouver, Washington, where you live, I understand, are like pretty close to one of those.
Yeah.
Is it kind of like the same metroplex?
Yeah, it's the same metro area.
Okay. So I'll often be referring to like the Portland area, but it's technically Washington, which is why Washington State University factors in for anybody who's confused or hasn't spent a lot of time in the U.S. Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, whenever I'm telling anyone where I'm from, I always just say Portland, because if I say Vancouver, they're going to think Canada.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so it sounds like you got the news. I don't know the extent, and just I don't want Mack to be negatively impacted by this podcast recording. I don't want to say anything he's going to regret. So keep that in mind when I'm asking these questions. I know I could ask more pointed questions like, what is your exact comp? Layoff, like how was this handled? XYZ. I'm not going to be prying in a lot of those things, just out of respect for Mack and his desire to, not sully his reputation in the eyes of future employers and stuff like that. And I would generally say it's probably not like going to suit your purposes to trash your former employer that just laid you off.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, you do see like those sycophantic posts on LinkedIn, like, such, you know what I'm talking about. If you're listening to this, you've probably seen people like, it's a weird dynamic. How are you navigating that dynamic?
I mean, just like any of those people, it's like you feel those flashes of emotion in the moment. And, part of both my, physical training as well as, I've been in therapy for years to manage that stuff because I've had some issues in the past with like, kind of, I guess, anger and stuff. But yeah, it's like, those writing something like that and just, kind of bursting off, can make you feel good in the moment, but, it's just not worth it in the long run.
Yeah.
And also it's like, you don't want to be defined by something that you felt very flippantly in a moment. It's like, that emotion might be very strong and very real. And, whether it's an hour or a day or a week or whatever, eventually it's going to dissipate. And so to go out and, trash people or, just to kind of go on a rant like that, just really isn't worth it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And at the same time, like, did you post anything on LinkedIn? Do you recall like where you were like, saying goodbye to a lot of colleagues or anything like that? Like, or were you just totally silent?
Nope, just totally silent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, I've never been through a layoff. I've been fired for cause for just sucking at my job before as an accountant when I was like a temp at some like, fuel company, essentially doing fuel taxes. I was very bad at that. And so I have been through that process and them sitting me down and saying like, see ya. But I haven't been through like some sort of structural layoff where I'm on a giant, video call, or I guess like not video call, but it's like a video call where the cameras are turned off so you don't have to see everybody crying. What were like the surprising aspects of that? And again, I'm not trying to dig into grisly details, but I just want to take people to like what that situation is like so they can mentally prepare themselves should that befall them.
You just mean like from the like kind of the fallout of
like,
having it happen to you?
Yeah, like what are some things people should expect if they're getting laid off from a big tech company?
It's like once that call happens, like you're dead. Like you don't exist anymore. Like just immediately. I think I got an email like 30 minutes after notification of like, oh, your GitHub Copilot has been expired and stuff like that. And fortunately, with the Washington state law, I think we're retained on payroll for like 60 days or something like that. Like we have to have a 60-day notice. So that's included with the severance. So that's kind of nice. But and that's part of the reason why I haven't like gone out and like proclaimed that I'm laid off and looking for work, because I know that that's not going to help me for leveraging negotiation or anything. And also technically I'm still on payroll till mid-July.
Okay.
So that's part of that.
So when you say it doesn't help you to do that, like you don't believe that there's a tactical advantage to letting people know? Do you think it like worsens your negotiating power?
I think so. And mainly that just comes from, I mean, if you're laid off and you're looking for work, I mean, people are going to assume you're desperate, in my opinion. So,
Yeah.
There's, like anything, there's two sides to the coin. And I think there's certainly probably ways that it can help you. And there's ways that it's a disadvantage, but I always think that, divulging less information is usually more beneficial to you.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why you aren't in a desperate situation. But first, I do want to like get a little bit more background on, your like how you came to be who you are, how you came to be the software engineer who's worked for like 10 years in big tech and has taught courses on electrical engineering and things like that. First, I want to thank the many, many kind people who support Free Code Camp. We have about 11,423 kind folks who support Free Code Camp through a monthly donation. And if you want to help make this podcast possible, make the Free Code Camp interactive learning platform possible, all the courses we're publishing on YouTube, the full-length books we're publishing on the Free Code Camp news page, where you can just like read an entire book on like Kubernetes and stuff like that for free in your browser. Consider supporting us. Go to donate.freecodecamp.org and help our charity's mission. I also want to say a big thank you to Wix Studio. They have provided a grant that makes this podcast possible. Wix Studio provides developers tools to rapidly build websites with everything out of the box, then extend, replace, and break boundaries with code. Learn more at wixstudio.com. So, MacKevin, you didn't have like a conventional childhood. We think of, kind of like the nuclear family of the mom and the dad and maybe the brothers and sisters and all that. Like, can you walk us through? And I want to be sensitive about this because I don't have this lived experience myself. My parents, I still talk to them and like I live with them. I did have a rough patch where I like moved out and lived in my car for like a year and just didn't, because like misunderstandings and stuff like that. But we've since repaired that. But you had like, I guess, a much more extreme childhood, if I can use that adjective.
Yeah. So, my parents were never married. I was born out of wedlock. I was raised by my paternal grandparents. So, that brought its own set of challenges. I always just felt a little bit alienated and odd growing up. And even, like the main sport that I played was tennis, growing up. So like, even that was different from everybody else. Although I did also play baseball, but tennis was my main thing. And then, going through school, I just loved math. I was always a few years ahead in math. And I always just, from 4 and 5 years old, like I just wanted to solve math problems all day. And so I had the great fortune of growing up. I was on competitive math teams in like later elementary and middle school. And we were really fortunate because our coaches were engineers. And so like we learned a lot of really advanced math, and that helped me out through high school. Like I already knew all of high school math by the time I got to high school. And I even knew a little bit of college math as well. And so like those foundational learnings also helped me succeed in college. So that was a big part of what got me to where I'm at.
Yeah. And then when it came time to go to school, so you've been playing tennis a lot. Were you able to get any sort of scholarships or anything for school, or what was school like?
No, it actually at that point I had kind of stopped. I was a little bit burnt out on it. And I had played I'd played tennis my freshman year of high school, because I tried out for the baseball team, didn't make it. And then I was just like, at that time I'd started doing cross country in high school because I was
cross country running.
Yeah, so I was really small, and so I had played football in middle school, which was kind of a joke. And then I was like, well, I don't want to die, because I was like under 100 pounds my freshman year of high school. So I was like, I need to do something to stay active, so I'll start running. I had no real interest in it. Like I just had a few friends that were doing it, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll go do that. So I started with cross country, and then when I didn't make the baseball team, I played tennis. And in fact, at that point, I had already not been playing tennis for like at least a year. And so I just, jumped in, worked my way up to number one pretty immediately on the team.
On the cross country team?
No, in tennis.
Oh, in tennis. Okay.
Yeah. And then after that season, then I just decided, I like running more. And if I want to be good at cross country, I got to do track also. So I'm just going to, focus my time on just running.
Yeah. So what was like the process of like applying to college and for you? Like you had all this math skill. You said that was like a primary focus. At this point, had you done very much programming or like engineering?
None. I didn't even start on any of that stuff until like halfway through college.
Okay.
But yeah, in terms of it, just like most things I do, it was a pretty deeply analytical process and search for where I wanted to go. I took it from a completely, open view, and I knew I wanted to apply to Washington State and University of Washington, and I had found out about University of Portland because they always have a good cross country team, so I was going to try to run there. Spoiler alert, didn't work out. Basically what I did was I was just like, okay, well, here's my interests. I was really good at math, and my family is pretty blue collar, so I didn't have the best guidance in terms of how to navigate that. So, and that was another good thing for me actually, was because it forced me to really, take the reins, and kind of control my destiny, so to speak. Um, but yeah, along those lines, when I was applying, I was just looking up, sorry, going back to what I said earlier about being in a blue collar family, they were just like, oh, you're smart, be a math teacher, be a doctor. And I was like, okay. And so, at first I thought what I really wanted to do was go, you know, study biology and chemistry, go be a doctor. Um, and so that was like my main plan. And so I was looking up schools and I was like, okay, how do I navigate and get to med school? And like, okay, I'm going to look at all the schools and see who has the best programs in biology and chemistry and, pick the intersection of that. And then, um, even at that age, I was still aware enough to be like, well, that might not work out though. So I need to, like, I know math is my bread and butter. So if I don't do that, a lot of my friends are talking about engineering, so I should look at engineering schools too.
Yeah.
In University of Portland, it's a small school, but it has a really strong engineering program, in pretty much, I think, in all disciplines that they offer. Um, and so that was kind of what I did, was I looked up all these schools, like literally over 100, and I was like, okay, what's going to get me into med school? If that doesn't work, like, what's a good engineering school? What schools have good cross country programs? Because I'm going to try to run. And so, I just kind of took the intersection of all those, and I came down to, a list of probably like 5 or 10 schools that, um, I also whittled away ones where it was like, that might be too far. Like, I don't want to be that far away from home, that kind of thing. So I just took that intersection, narrowed it down, and then applied to those schools, and that's how I went about it.
Yeah, and like in terms of finances and stuff, did you get any sort of support from the school? Were you living with your grandparents? Like how did you manage that period?
Yeah, so that I was I think it was, yeah, on my 18th birthday. It was very much like, all right, you're on your own. I mean, I was still living at home for that last year of high school, but um, my grandparents didn't have a lot of money, so it was like once I was out of the house, like I was completely on my own, which was fine. Like growing up, like that's what I aspired to. That's what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
anyways, and be independent. Like I've always just been hyper independent, probably because of my upbringing. Um, but yeah, so sorry, I forgot part of the
Yeah,
question.
like in terms of like paying for school and everything like
Oh yeah, yeah,
all that.
yeah. So that was just applying for financial aid and all that stuff. And University of Portland, it's a little bit more costly than like WSU or UW, um, but they do offer a lot of aid both from the school directly, and then yeah, just because of my you know financial status with my grandparents and everything, like I got a bunch of financial aid from the government as well.
Okay, cool. So, you're going to school, and like, how do you? I mean, you said you were interested in becoming a doctor, but it sounds like you specialize much more in engineering.
Hmm. Yeah, so my first year, um, I think I was majoring in biology. I switched my major a bunch of times because I had no real idea what I wanted to do. Um, that was kind of a really lost period for me, especially because there was a way bigger turnout than usual for the cross country team that year, and so previously they used to carry a really big team, much bigger than any other school, but that year there was just way too many people, and so I got cut from that. And so now I'm away from home. I'm in Portland. It's not that far away from Spokane. It's only 6 hours, but I'm away from home, um, and yeah, then I'm not running, and I don't really know what to do with school. But yeah, so I was studying biology at the time. I go through that, and I'm like, I just really don't like this. It's all memorization. Like there's no like doing work. That's how my brain works. Is that I want to be able to solve problems and
Yeah.
learn that way instead of just doing rote memorization. Um, so yeah, I got through that, and then I was like, well, I think it was my sophomore year that I was like, still not sure of what I wanted to do, but I was like, well, I'll keep trying to do the doctor thing. So I'll stay in like chemistry or biochemistry or something. But at that point, I had started already forking the path towards engineering. most of my friends in the dorm were mechanical engineers. And, that was something that had always, like Newtonian mechanics had always been very intuitive for me. So I was like, yeah, I'll go do that. So then I started taking like physics, um, which I hadn't done because that wasn't required for biology or chemistry. But yeah, started doing those like intro engineering classes that were just kind of generalized. And I also took a couple of like actual sophomore level mechanical engineering classes as well. And I did really like it, but it was after those 2 years, still not entirely sure what I wanted to do. Was looking for an internship and just lucked into that one at Tektronix.
Hmm.
It wasn't it, so those oscilloscope videos that you saw, that was not even part of the plan when I got there. Like I got there, it was in a business unit, and like I was just helping them, basically like crunch numbers on like their sales reports and stuff. And I was there for a couple weeks, and it was like, the internship was supposed to be, like a 40-hour per week position, but they really only had like 10 hours of work for
Yeah.
me.
So you
And so
found work for yourself.
yeah,
And,
so they're
and the
like,
oscilloscope courses you're talking about is
mm,
like it's a detailed, like incredibly detailed, like how to with
mhm,
one of their oscilloscopes, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that wasn't even my idea. They were just trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my time, and yeah, the tech support um, uh, group, they were like, well, we could really use an intern. Like we want to. One of the guys on the team had this idea of, oh, instead of, because they're a support center, they're like, we don't want to be answering phone calls all day. So they're like, so, we'll come up with the most common, the 10 most common subjects, and we'll make YouTube videos for how to do those. And so, yeah, they just kind of threw me to the wolves on that. And so when I was doing that, like I had to learn all this stuff on the fly. Like I had never done anything with programming. I'd done a little bit of like theoretical circuits and physics. Um, but all that stuff was just entirely new to me. And
Yeah.
so, but I had a really good mentor that was working with me and coaching me through all that stuff. And yeah, he did a really great job at just, you know, letting me go do it on my own and just come back to him if I needed support on stuff. But yeah, I just end to end, like I did those videos 100%. I wrote the scripts for like, how we should walk through the whole thing. Like I learned the oscilloscope top to
Yeah.
bottom to figure out, how to uh, convey those ideas and help
Yeah.
people.
I'm just real quick. What is an oscilloscope for people who don't know what it is, and why is it useful?
Well, I'm probably going to butcher this because it's been so long. I mean, that was like 12 or 13 years ago. But basically, an oscilloscope is a tool that's used to basically measure like electrical signals. And so when you're working like, really low level and like actually trying to measure like, data crossing a wire or, voltages on that wire, that's what you use an oscilloscope for.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So it's a tool that it's got like this kind of like pen thing, and you just stick it against the circuit board.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
cool. And it's like this pretty big rack. Like if anybody's seen like, I'm trying to think of like an old CD player or something like that. It's like a
It's
big, yeah,
it's really even more like it's almost like more like a boombox, old
yeah,
boombox.
yeah. So it's a big piece of gear, and
Uh-huh.
and the company you're working at is one of the main manufacturers of these.
Hmm.
And then every electrical engineering department,
Hmm.
is going to have a lab where they've
Right,
got
right.
tons of these. Like you go to like a
Hmm.
robotics lab or something,
Hmm.
and okay, so you created these video courses on that, and
Hmm.
along the way, you got to kind of just in time learn so
Hmm.
that you could turn around and then teach what you just learned.
Right. Yep. And then yeah, so when I dove into that, like I didn't have to do much programming, but I had to do a little bit of it. And most of it was just learning like circuitry hardware stuff. But um, yeah, once I started doing that, I was like, this is it. Like this is the way to go. And like I'd already, if I'm remembering correctly, I think I was still trying to do like pre-med, but mechanical engineering is my major. And it was like the day before class started, I was like, scrap all that. I'm gonna double major in computer science and electrical engineering. Like I know this is what I want to do.
Wow.
And even before that, like I was always kind of jealous of my electrical engineering, computer science classmates. Just like I'd see what they're working on, and like I have no idea what it is, but I'm just like that looks cool. Like I
Yeah.
think like that's what I want to do. But it wasn't until that internship that I really got into the, you know, the mud on that and figured all that stuff
Awesome.
out.
Well, so how do you go from that to working as an engineer at Intel, which is one of the more prestigious shops? Like they do
Hmm.
the hardcore engineering.
Hmm.
Can you talk about that process?
Hmm. Yeah, so then, yeah, so I went through school, finished, I did double bachelor's degree in computer science and electrical engineering, and, I knew that I wanted to stay in the area because I really liked the Portland area. Um, and so, Intel is one of the big players in this area. Um, and, at that time, I also wasn't sure whether I wanted to do electrical engineering or computer science because my skills were definitely more on the electrical engineering side. And I had also taken a VLSI course,
What is
um,
VLSI?
very large scale integration. So
Okay.
it's like the fabrication process of how chips are made. And so, we're just doing like toy examples in the class, making like, 0 to 16 counters, but like you're actually doing like the photolithography, like, in theory, or like you're,
Photolithography is where you essentially use like a bright light or a laser or something to
mhm,
etch the
yeah.
actual boards.
Yeah, and there's also like this layout tool that we do to like design the layers and the interconnections. And there's a lot of fun math that goes into all that stuff. But yeah, at the time, I was definitely my skills were more on that side, and I always thought I was going to be like a like a circuit designer, hardware designer, because my like I was pretty mediocre at programming until my last year of school, and then the way that my schedule was, it was just backloaded. Like I had done all my electrical engineering classes, and it was backloaded with computer science. So then once I went through that gauntlet, it was like, okay, well now everything's flipped, and I'm better at that. Um, but so then that's why I went to Intel is because I was like, you know, I don't know if I want to go hardware side or software side. They have both. Like, so I'm going to go there. And, actually, even that job search was a little bit rough. I'd been, and, I'd had other internships like the successive summers after that first one. And, I knew to apply early and I was applying early and I was, not getting anything. And I was a little bit panicked because it was like, I think it was a week or two before graduation and I still didn't have anything. And, I just kept applying. And then finally I lucked out. That Intel position came up. I interviewed for it, got it. And then, yeah, I was there for 6 years after that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about tips that like for people that want to do kind of like
Hmm.
not necessarily just like building software as a service app, but like lower level
Hmm.
programming and can you talk about what you did at Intel and then like maybe based off of that experience, what you learned, what information you would send back to a college student who was in your
Hmm.
state, like doing electrical engineering, computer science course, who would want to work like in kind of like a hardware adjacent software engineering role.
Hmm. Yeah, so my first year there, I started out in firmware validation. And so we were working with the firmware on the server chipsets, but we were just doing the validation for them and writing the test suites for those. And then after about a year, I switched over to
And
the
what is that? That's just making sure that the chip functions as designed.
yeah, yeah. So we would have like these really large spec documents, and then yeah, we're just writing tests to make sure that the functionality of the chipset matches the spec. And that gets down to low level stuff of like making sure that you know you expect like you run it, you issue a firmware command on the chipset, and then you're making sure that like the byte stream is what you expect on the other end. Um, and so, anyways, after about a year of being in the validation side, then I switched over to development. And with there, I worked a little bit on the firmware, but mostly I was working on the ROM. And so the ROM is the code that is permanently on the
Yeah, the
silicon.
read-only
Hmm.
memory. So like the
Hmm.
ROMs that like get flash and then like a board might have tons of these little ROMs in them,
Hmm.
and that's just like the preloaded operations.
Yep. Yep. And so with that, like that was really interesting, like kind of development environment because we had we there's real hardware that you can kind of test on, but it's the previous generation. And so like what's built into the ROM is this like ROM bypass. And so then you can bypass the actual ROM that's written on there. It's kind of a hack to bypass that, and then you can load in your own ROM. And so we would use that like as initial testing to be able to like proof of concept, some code on the real hardware, but then we were also working with these simulation and emulation environments. And so kind of how the spectrum works is that the closer you get to actual reality, the exponentially slower it is to be able to like run and test on those. So like, you can work on the real hardware, but it's going to be very, it's not trustworthy at all just because it's previous generation hardware. And you're just kind of trying to test a little bit of logic on there. And then we have the simulation environment, which, as far as a human is concerned, it's pretty much like real time, even though it's definitely way slower. But, when a boot flows like 10 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds, and then, in the simulation, you're waiting for, 5 or 10 seconds, like that's not a big deal to you. But so we have the simulation environment, which was very fast, but also unreliable because it's just a pure like logical representation of what the hardware is supposed to be. And then, oh, and I was actually missing one. There's like a FPGA hybrid one that's like a hybrid between the simulation and the emulation. Um, so that's also both more accurate and a little bit slower. And then at the extreme end, you have the emulation environment where it's supposedly trying to represent everything like down to a atomic level, like speed of light and everything. And so
Wow.
with that,
So
yeah,
like extreme, simulation of physics.
yeah, it's like if your code passes the tests in the emulation, like it should be reality. Um, and so with that, the trade-off is like I was mentioning before, it's only like 10 or 100 millisecond boot flow. Like the shortest test run is somewhere between like 6 and 12 hours on
Yeah.
this emulation. And so that was kind of the flow of working on that was like you'd start with the real hardware just to like get basic um, sort of proof of concept on some stuff. And then even after just a little bit of that, you'd kind of ditch that and then the simulation would become kind of your baseline.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of just like going through this uh, kind of iterative process of like, okay, I'm going to test things out in simulation. And then, okay, now I can go and test those in emulation. But, I'm pretty much going to be waiting a day to get results
Okay.
back on that. Um, and then, you just go back and, okay, test more things out in simulation. And then you just keep going back and forth.
So that was like your basically your job for like 6 years. Is that the main thing you were doing?
Oh, no, that one,
Testing
that,
hardware?
that one was, well, so for the ROM, I was doing both development and validation for that one.
Okay.
Because that one,
So you're like writing the code, and then you're just like
mm,
any other code you write. You should have tests to verify the code does what you want it to do, and not a whole lot of stuff you don't want it to do. Right.
yeah.
So you were essentially doing both those roles.
Yep. Yeah, and also I don't know if it's that way anymore, but like when I first started Intel, it was very much like there was a development team and there was a validation team, and those were split. Um, Everything that I've done at Microsoft, it's like you own everything end to end.
Yeah.
It's like you have to be responsible for everything.
And
Um,
my understanding is that's where it's going in general with software development. Is you write your own tests, and because otherwise it's like you're throwing stuff over the cubicle wall, and other people are having to deal with your sloppy coding, and it's not fair. And also, you probably become a lot better when you're in that iterative loop. Is my thinking. Like if I'm writing my own tests and I screw up, then I learned immediately from it. I don't have to hear secondhand information from some QA engineer a few days later. Oh, by the way, the code didn't work. Like you're finding that out instantaneously or near instantaneously. I guess if it takes 12 hours to run a full physical simulation, maybe 12 hours later. But still, okay, cool. So, by the way, FPGA is Field Programmable Gate Array.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Just I like to define any acronym so people don't feel like we're throwing alphabet soup at them to sound smart. We're not concerned with sounding smart. We're concerned with sharing as much insight as possible with people tuning in. So, time at Intel. What point did you want to jump over to Microsoft? Like, what was that transition like?
So going back to the ROM stuff, so I'd done that for a couple of years, and then after that point, like I had kind of started to feel like, well, maybe there's some better opportunity for me, and also like at that point I had decided and I had been doing, even though that was still like close to the hardware, like everything that I was doing was software. So I was like, at that point, I know that okay, software is where I want to be, and Intel's not a software company. And so like if I really, want to go where the best people are to learn from for software, I want to go to, preferably one of the big tech giants or, something similar. So that's what kind of spurred me on to go look. And obviously, being from Washington, Microsoft is like a big deal to me.
I mean, it's the biggest corporation on earth, right?
Yeah.
So I just have to observe. You went from being very interested in math to being very interested in physics to being very interested in electrical engineering to being very interested in like computer hardware to being interested in software.
Yeah.
It's like you're just climbing up the abstraction ladder essentially throughout your entire kind of like early adult life.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's a great way to put it. And yeah, that's one of the things that I love about just computers in general is that, there's so many different kind of rungs to the ladder of abstraction, and there's so many different like interesting layers to work at. And one of the really cool things about when I started at Microsoft was that, they kind of took a big chance on me because, here I am working on, this very low level, close to the hardware stuff, which Microsoft also has jobs for that. But my role that I was, most recently at Microsoft was, very high up the abstraction ladder. And that was, doing cloud development and things at internet scale and things of that nature. So, but, everything that I learned in the past set me up well to be able to, jump in and learn that stuff on the fly.
Yeah. Awesome. So, by the way, when I mentioned Microsoft's the largest corporation in the world, I just had to check, but it is currently by market cap, the largest corporation on earth. That is not hyperbole. Okay. So walk me through your first few years at Microsoft. You managed to make senior engineer. Like, I know there's like the whole level system in engineering and stuff like that. Like, maybe you can talk about like your time there. I don't know if it'd be cool to like reflect on your time there, but like how you progressed through that, just very quickly to give people some context into what they could expect if they were to go work at a big tech company. I think you were there for like 5 years or so.
Well, a little over 4.
Okay.
Yep. So anyways, one thing I like to say is that the like Intel's a really big company, but the jump, like just in terms of like the corporate ecosystem, like the jump from going Intel to Microsoft is, I think, even bigger than going from college to Intel. And it's just like, there's like, it's just so big. Like, it's truly like its own country almost. Just in
like
terms of the scale.
200,000 plus employees.
Yeah. And just, both in terms of how many employees there are, how many, how big their, product portfolio is, all the like built-in infrastructure that we have, all the resources that are available. Like, it's just massive and mind-blowing.
Yeah. And what did you learn during like, if you can take us through those 4+ years there, like how things started out, like what your first few months were like, and then, at what point you started to feel like you were gaining some degree of understanding and agency within the organization, if that happened?
Yeah. I mean, I felt like that pretty immediately, even though it was all very new. I mean, just like any job, it's you get kind of the drinking from the fire hydrant of knowledge, so to speak. And so like that can be a little bit overwhelming. And it definitely was challenging at the beginning because here I am jumping in, new people, like totally new area of work. But, everyone was so supportive in helping me when I had questions or when I didn't know what I was doing. But also like just kind of the company culture and everything, like there was so much documentation and, so many learning resources where I could just go, definitely the first couple weeks to a month, like I was just purely learning all these new technologies. And I don't think I did any like actual meaningful work for like the first month or so.
Yeah.
And they were also really supportive of that as well. Like when I started, my skip level manager at the time was like, we don't expect you to be up to speed until a year. Just because, it's so big and there's so much to learn. But I definitely felt like I was up to speed in a lot shorter than that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun being able to like just jump in, with the support of the team and having the confidence to be able to learn these new things and just kind of hit the ground running.
Yeah. What were some of the most profound things that you took away from your time at Microsoft in terms of like best practices that you're going to apply elsewhere? Like I know Amazon famously has like their 12 principles and everybody jokes about, like how it's like cultish or something like that, but like there are probably some actual like usable conventions that have been adopted by these giant corporations if they're getting things done, if they're able to succeed and grow like they have. Are there things that you observe there that's like, oh, this is actually something like counterintuitive, but it's definitely true, and this is going to be a useful thing to apply in my life?
I don't know about counterintuitive, but it's just like it's really just as simple as the company's mission statement and just their main not leadership principle, but kind of their main ethos of like, don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all.
Don't be a
And
know-it-all, be a learn-it-all.
yep. And then the company mission, I can't remember exactly word for word, but something about like empower every person and every organization on the planet to do better or something like that. And so, despite what happened a week ago, it very much is that like supportive culture. And, I really didn't run into many, if any, jerks at Microsoft. Like everyone was really about learning and being better. And that really coincides with kind of like my, training methodology and running is that, or I guess kind of my mindset is that like, yeah, I go out and compete and race and stuff, but I'm never trying to, beat my opponents. I'm trying to be better than I was before. I'm trying to get my best. And, it is, when you have other people to compare against, like can be, somewhat validating, but like, and I am very competitive, but it's not like, I'm not trying to do it at the expense of other people. But so
Yeah.
how that relates back to Microsoft is that, yeah, it was a very academic feel, um, which is kind of ironic because it's like the most corporate of all the big tech companies. Um, but yeah, it was just very, very growth oriented. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to transition from talking about kind of like your career and your background to some other topics that I think people tuning in may find helpful. We're lucky in that you have a lot of expertise in areas that most of our guests do not. And I'm just going to point out that like you win cross country races. That's like a big deal. Like all these people are training, they're working really hard, and you go and you're like first place. That's a big deal. And the other thing is that you and your wife over the past few years have built out like a portfolio of, I believe, real estate is the main asset that you hold, and that you have more than $1 million worth of real estate. Essentially, like that. I don't know if that includes your primary residence, but like you're building out like this kind of like portfolio of stuff that like you're taking the funds you're making from your corporate job and you're essentially investing them. Is that an accurate statement? And this is not financial advice. We are not a financial advice podcast. And most financial advice that like I would give is just like, save money, keep your costs low, buy index funds, stuff like that. Like anybody will tell you that, and people might sell you like some fancy book or anything like that. I just want to be clear. We're not trying to sell you anything. We don't really care, but like this is one person's lived experience and how they're handling, preparing for risks and things like that, and preparing to like have something to potentially leave their kids. I don't even know if you have kids or plan to have kids, but
Yeah, too.
oh, okay, cool. So do I. So yeah, I'm just going to step back and maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and we could definitely talk about trail running and like you've said that like a huge part of how you're successful is managing your physical health and your mental health.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So which part did you want me to start with?
Yeah, let's start with the physical and mental.
Physical and mental. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, running is just something that I've been doing for so long, dating back to my freshman year of high school. And there was a gap there, like in college, I can't remember if I mentioned that didn't work out running on the cross country team there.
Yeah.
But so I took a little bit of a break there, but I actually, I'd kind of go on and off working out, running and lifting weights and stuff in college. And I actually had this weird thing where like, if I didn't work out for like 2 weeks, I'd have these episodes where like I'd start like breaking out in a rash, and
That's
like
weird.
it like I joke, but it was like I was allergic to not working out. But so yeah, like the main thing is just that I've lost a lot of people to health issues, physical health issues. And so like that's always been one thing in the back of my mind, is that like, my body is the most important thing, both my, my brain as well as my heart. And that's where, kind of most, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but like kind of most leading causes of death are, and something that I'm
so like
anxious about.
Cardiovascular, like heart issues, high blood pressure. Again, we're not doctors. This is not medical advice, but like every time I go to Walmart to like buy some baby carrots or whatever, I put my arm into that little cuff and I just go ahead and get my blood pressure taken real quick. Takes like 2 seconds. It's free. Like they have these little blood pressure kiosks, and I encourage people to use those just to monitor the blood pressure, for example, because it's a silent killer. People don't know until it's too late. Everything's fine, and all of a sudden you're having a stroke because you didn't necessarily. And there are other causes of strokes too, but like managing your blood pressure is one of the simplest things you can do to like increase longevity.
Yeah, so like, I'm definitely on the more extreme end. Like, when I'm telling other people advice on how to train, like I'm definitely like, don't think you have to be like me. Like when I'm at my peak, I'm running at least 10 miles a day. Like it's nothing.
Yeah.
As long as you're getting like 30 minutes in, like that's great. But yeah, so basically like, I know that if I do this and if I do it religiously, that it's going to have profound effects, definitely on my physical health, but also really helps out a lot mentally, because it's something you can do, move your body. Like for me, it really helps that like, I lose anxiety and I lose anger and stuff like that by going out and, using my body and going out to run, whether that's running or lifting weights or rock climbing or whatever. But yeah, like, sorry, lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no worries. So physical health is a big deal, and so you maintain that, and it sounds like it is not. It's like a net positive in the sense that not only are you getting exercise, but it has this halo effect affecting your thought process and your mood and all these other things that are important to getting things done, having like a happy day-to-day life.
Yeah, and it also trains you. I mean, the mental aspect also, just in terms of mental toughness, because running is very hard on your body. In fact, I have a little injury right now with a mild calf strain, but it's very hard on your body. It's not fun. It's really boring. It's fun. Like I've been doing it so long, and like I'm usually running solo, and like I've just been in that cycle for so long that like now it is fun. Like I love going out and like just exploring a nearby park and forest.
Yeah.
And
you got lots of natural beauty up there. Like here in Texas, I'm literally just running around a field with like lawn mowed and stuff, like going to a local track or something, running through the burbs. But you've got like lots of varied elevation. I mean, like Portland area, and I haven't been to Vancouver, Washington, but it's like I did go up there and I did visit some of the parks and did some light trail running.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great features to run around here, but yeah, like I was saying, it really helps with the mental toughness, which is really required, especially in a job like this, because you're people think that like being physically active burns a lot of calories, but again, not medical advice. I'm pretty sure your brain draws a lot more energy than anything that you can do physically. And so when you're working on, really hard problems all day, like that requires a lot of mental toughness, even if you're taking breaks regularly and making sure that, you're not getting burnt out. But yeah, it's like when you're going through that every day and you're just, just one step at a time, which is a great metaphor for life and everything. You're just getting through it one step at a time. And then before you know it, an hour's up, or an hour and a half, however long you're going out running. And then, you're done. And so like that really helps prepare for the mental toughness side, and, being able to push through work when like, with work, like there's always drudgery. Like it's not always going to be fun, even if it's in a field that you're super passionate about. So you need to have a reason to, in a way, to be able to like stick with things and see them through to the end. And so I think that the running really helps out with that.
Yeah, 100%. I love going swimming. For example, I've switched to swimming just because it's lower impact. And so I just swim medleys and just think like I'm alone in my thoughts while I'm swimming, and like there's no music or anything. It's just me. It's kind of meditative. If that's the correct adjective. Do you find do you meditate on top of doing this? I mean, you mentioned that you do therapy, which is something that I'm impressed that you're so open about that, because a lot of people, especially men, there's like this stigma associated with like talking about your feelings and stuff like that. But you don't seem to
No, and part of that is like I've been in it for so long. I started probably like a year before my oldest son was born, and he is almost 6. So like I've been in it for that long, been seeing the same therapist for that amount of time, and we have, a great relationship and rapport and everything. And yeah, that's what like as you said, there's the stigma around it, but like when my wife was helping me find a therapist, like this guy was advertising like, quote, man therapy, and like, that just kind of helped me like lower my guard, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who's considering getting therapy? And I don't personally believe that therapy is necessary for everybody. I don't personally have a therapist. I have been in therapy sessions in the past. But like I'm not actively getting therapy. But like what would you say to somebody who's asking the question, okay, would therapy be a good option for me? Obviously there's monetary costs and things like that, but if you set those aside and you just think, okay, would I be a good candidate for benefiting from therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I would just like, in terms of figuring out like if you should do it, I mean, of course, my opinion is unequivocally yes, just because the common theme with everything is like I live for self-improvement and like getting better at things, and that's just another avenue for me to get better at things. And so from that perspective, like, yeah, theoretically, I think everyone should do it. Everyone would benefit from it. But if you are asking whether you really need it, I mean, you should kind of reflect on your life and things and see like, are there areas of your life that are impacting like your happiness or your health or stuff like that? Like, if there's certain aspects of your life that are getting in the way of you thriving, like that's definitely a reason to go to therapy.
Like addiction or something like that, or just
Yeah, it
being
could be
angry
that
all the
or
time.
uh,
I've met lots of people that seem to struggle with anger, and
mhm,
maybe I struggle with it a little bit, and maybe that's part
mhm,
of the reason why I left home and lived in my car
mhm,
for a year and dropped out of high school and stuff because I was
mhm,
angry, like the
uh,
angry young man
mhm,
motif
uh.
or trope. Uh,
Quick note. That just reminded me while I was back running Bloomsday in Spokane, I ran into an old friend that I hadn't seen since high school graduation, 15 years. Um, had a long conversation with him. He fit that archetype, and yeah, we somehow started talking about therapy, and he was going to maybe go check it out. But
yeah,
there's a fun thing to add to that.
yeah. Well, one of the things that you and your wife done that is perhaps different from a lot of your peers.
Mhm,
And again, I don't want to sound judgmental or anything, but like you have been, blessed with this very high compensating job
mhm,
that you work very hard to earn
mhm,
through studying and everything. But like Microsoft engineer, I imagine that
mhm,
pays pretty well. You're
mhm,
living in a relatively high cost part of the country and everything like that.
mhm,
How have you parlayed that financial kind of windfall of working as an engineer for many years into
mhm,
building out kind of like a more robust, maybe like recurring revenue and stuff like that,
mhm,
diversifying, so to speak?
mhm. Yeah, so the start was, I mean, just like anything else that we've been talking about, it was just kind of a lucky chance encounter when I was at Intel. I made good friends with one of my coworkers, and he was super interested, like, he wasn't super knowledgeable yet, but he was very interested in the whole, like, kind of the FIRE, financial independence,
Yeah,
retire early.
it's financial independence, retire early, fire.
Yeah.
There's like a subreddit.
Um, mhm. Yeah, so he was super into that. I he got me into it. I'm not a super big advocate of fire explicitly, just because it sometimes it kind of comes across as like, oh, live poor right now, save up a bunch of money so that you can retire and kind of live poor for the rest of your life, but not need anything extra. Um,
Yeah,
and
you
so like,
probably describe my lifestyle and like just I'm obsessed with saving money, and this is one of the things I learned from spending a lot of time in China. China is
mhm,
a land of incredible uncertainty with what
mhm,
are the capricious whims of the leadership.
mhm,
Are we going to have another great famine and like all this stuff? So people were like saving half of their earnings, like
mhm,
and also because the countries like finance were completely locked down, there's no place to put the money. So
mhm,
like people were plowing it into real estate. It was seen as the safest place. And actually, if you
mhm,
followed like the Evergrande and like a lot of these other financial or like these property development. Like they had all this money because everybody was so desperately saving money because of the ambiguity. And then, yeah, it's crazy. But that I don't need to go into that. But what I want to say is, like, I learned a lot from my time in China about how people would just kind of quietly take like half their earnings and like put them away, just in case. And that had a profound impact on me. So I've been like really, I guess, thrifty would be a generous way of saying it, but basically just refusing to spend money on stuff and like, But
which like
you're so that's more like fire what people would be advocating on Reddit, which I'm not that familiar with the subreddit. I've just heard about it. But you're more interested in like having some like baseline level of relative prosperity, and not like, are you interested in retiring early?
yeah, but also, I mean, when I say retire early, I mean basically just like switch into mission-driven work,
Okay.
and doing things purely because I want to do them and not because I need them to be able to, sustain my existence, basically. Um, but yeah, so I was lucky to, run into this guy that, we became really good friends. He was a coworker at Intel, and he got me into this group that was starting learning about, investing and, just financial literacy. And it started out as just like a couple of us in a conference room and just talking about these ideas. The guy that was leading it, he was very knowledgeable, but he hadn't quite like ascended yet. And then,
What does that mean? Ascend.
so a couple of years later, like by the time I left Intel, those meetings, they were like 500-person teleconference calls, and we would have like celebrity investors come talk. Um, and these people, like a lot of the guests that we had that were teaching us in those meetings, like they were people that had to like all of their purchases, like they had to file through the SEC in terms of like buying stocks and stuff because that's the amount of money that they're working with. And so, yeah, through that, we just learned like different techniques. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but like, when you're an employee, you're reliant on that income. And, if you lose your job, you lose your income. And so, and also like, even if you have savings, like if you're not investing that properly, like if you just have all your cash under your mattress or even in the bank, like in the bank, you're not going to get as high of an interest return, on that money. Um, so, yeah, basically just knowing like where to put your money to get like passive income, whether that could be, stock market and stock growth, or, I don't want to be beholden to the expansion and contraction of the stock market, which is why we've diversified and also have real estate so that we can actually generate real passive income. But yeah, that's
Okay, so passive income. Can you describe that?
yeah. So that's where basically you're making money while you sleep is
Okay.
the shortest way to say
So
that.
one form of passive income might be having like a software as a service tool that people are
Yep.
using for
Yep.
like, I don't know, automating some task. Like you've got like essentially a cron job running on some server somewhere, and you've got like a nice front end for it. Like every time some football game's about to come on, send me a text message with a link to it on like some pirate website or something, so I can watch it without spending money. I don't know. I'm not advocating piracy, but like just some simple task like that, right? Piracy is a recurring theme. I was just talking with somebody else about like how those you wouldn't steal a car ads. They actually used like a font that may not have paid the license to use that weird like ransom letter font. Anyway, so like there are lots of ways of creating recurring income that is passive.
Right.
But real estate is like the classic one because you like buy a building with like a bunch of apartments, and then you rent that out, and every month somebody's sending you money to pay the rent, and then you're using some of that money to pay off the mortgage or whatever that the financial instrument that you use to purchase the building if you didn't buy it with cash, and then you're using some other for like maintenance and insurance, tax and all this other stuff, but you still have some extra money left over at the end of that. The entire reason for buying an apartment building is it is like an expected value positive
Right.
investment, right?
Yeah, and like so part of that investment group, that was like something that was really drilled into me is that like after going through all those kind of like mini lectures and just like going through all those ideas, was just that like now I have this view where it's like and sometimes it's not great, but uh, like I really just view everything in terms of assets and liabilities, and so like where some people might get into trouble because they're not being frugal enough or overspending. It's like I look at anything that I purchase and I'm like, okay, is this an asset or a liability? And if it's a liability, like I really need to justify, like I have to internally justify that purchase,
Yeah.
um, because I don't want to just be losing money for no reason. Um, basically kind of always having that mindset of, which it also feels a little bit scummy, but like, I'm always seeking a return on an investment. So,
Yeah. And I've got this scarcity mindset. And again, it may be held over from living in my car for a year and just sweeping floors and stuff. But like, I always convert things into my hourly rate. Like, okay, how much is this bubble tea that I just got? It costs $5. Wow. Like, this boba is, the equivalent of like 20 minutes worth of work or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
and I used to make $5.25 an hour. That was the federal minimum wage. And I worked at Taco Bell and I made that much money. And so if somebody invites me, hey, let's go to the bar and get a beer or whatever, I'm like, damn, this beer is like the equivalent of 30 minutes of hard work sitting there taking people's orders through the drive-through. And by taking that, it just forced, like, I can't undo the frugality mindset. Like, it's just going to be with me. Like, and you hear these stories of people that are extremely wealthy and they refuse to use like the hotel, like clothes washing service because it's a ripoff. And it is a ripoff. You've got tons of money, but they still can't bring themselves to use it because it seems like an EV negative, expected value negative proposition. And like, I'll just wash my shirt in the sink with some shampoo. It's all good,
Yeah. Well, to touch on that a little bit, sorry, lost my train of thought.
Well, it's just about being frugal. And then you were talking about like, looking for return and everything.
Yeah. You also got to, like, in that situation, like the extreme frugality is, you also got to kind of balance it because like there's also the opportunity cost. It's like, I always like to tell people, like, the example I give is like, someone who has Jeff Bezos money, like Jeff Bezos doesn't do his own grocery shopping.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time. Like, even if it only takes an hour, like, I don't know how much he's making an hour, but it's like on the order of millions.
Amount of money.
Yeah, so it's like,
the classic example is like if Bill Gates is walking down the street and there's $100 bill on the ground, it's not worth his time to bend down and pick it up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's another thing that I also like try to keep in mind to kind of balance that.
Yeah. So, how has your engineering mindset like informed your kind of like thinking around? I guess you said that ultimately you're not interested in retiring so much as just like retiring from having to be beholden to something you don't necessarily care as much about the mission. So that you can do stuff that you do care about the mission, which could be, running a charity, or it could be, creating some sort of, money-making venture that you think is a net positive for the world instead of just purely extractive, like a lot of businesses are.
Yeah, so kind of tying that back to what we were talking about earlier, was that another thing that I learned in that class, or I say class, but in those discussions, was that like, your dollar is basically a vote for a company. One of the reasons why, wanting to have the financial independence is not like, it's not just I'm trying to get rich so that I can have all these toys and everything and all these fun, exciting things. Like, it's about being in a position where I have actual freedom, and then like, if I can make even more than what I need to live off of, like, I want to use that to help other people, because my dollar, is a vote for those things. So like, whether it's, contributing to like OPB or to like your foundation or wherever, like, I want to be able to be in a position where I can actually help out and use my dollars to help people out.
Yeah. What is OPB?
That's the Oregon Public Broadcasting.
Okay.
I think it's part of NPR.
So it's kind of like so you support kind of like private-public partnership type, radio and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
and for anybody who knows a lot about like local broadcasting, it's been hollowed out and corporatized, and like there are just a few giant, conglomerates that own basically all the local news and stuff like that. So, hats off to you for supporting like your local, journalists essentially. So let's talk about the layoff and what you have done with your family and how this, like, what I want to do is kind of like the parable of the grasshopper and the ant. You may have heard that the ant's like working very hard, and the grasshopper is like, why are you working so hard? Everything's fine. And then comes the winter, and the grasshopper is not prepared, and the ants are prepared, and they've got everything they need underground, and they're fine. Right. So, like for people out there, and I don't know that anybody actually listening is this naive, babe in the woods, but for those people that think like, oh, it's all good, like I'll just go out and get another job immediately if I lose this one, like I've got all these in-demand skills and stuff. It may actually be that way in some fields, but I think for a lot of people, it's not a bad thing to be prepared. So maybe you can talk about how you prepared over the past few years when you did have all this income coming in, and now how your situation might be different from somebody who hadn't prepared and was in a less favorable position after getting suddenly laid off out of nowhere.
Yeah, so kind of like what we were talking about earlier is just that, yeah, I wasn't necessarily, expecting or planning for this to happen, but, you always got to be prepared for worst case scenarios. And I mean, that was also a big, kind of tenet of that, that investment learning series. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I wasn't planning on it. I was mostly, concerned about just trying to grow this as much as possible so that in the event, if I need it, then I have it. And so that's basically what we did. But, yeah, we just tried to save as much as we could while we could, before we had kids. It was a lot easier to save money. It's been not as easy just because, childcare costs are really high and everything. But that's another reason to even prepare for that, because that's a huge hit to your income when you have kids and they need to be, cared after because both parents are working. But yeah, so just using that knowledge that I had gained to, both, keep my stocks that I get through work, also invest in stocks, invest in retirement, max out all that stuff. And then, yeah, learning about kind of the real estate side, and then just using that to just kind of hedge against the market because, like I said, the market, there is some passive income there in forms of dividends and stuff, but at the same time, I don't believe that dividends are truly passive income because, the math is that they, that's a disbursement from company profits. And so the stock price necessarily has to come down by that much. And,
Yeah.
it's kind of artificial because it's just a dollar amount and not something bad in earnings happened. And so the actual value is down. It's just the literal value is down.
There's no free lunch. It's not like
Yeah.
the money just got dropped from helicopters
Yeah.
when they released the dividend. It is going to be reflected in changes in the stock price. And essentially, if you believe in efficient market theory and all this stuff, and there are different levels of that, but
Right.
at the end of the day, a lot of the complicated aspects of finance and stuff just kind of melt away into, okay, this is the value of the asset. The price reflects everything. Right. And again, this is not finance, and anybody who's listening who does have a better understanding of this, feel free to jump in on the comments if on YouTube and correct us. I don't want to be I don't want to be introducing misinformation or mischaracterizations of these sort of things, but you're going to hear a lot of stuff about finance where oh, be sure to look for XYZ or value companies or blah 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 blah. And I definitely see what you're saying about okay, real estate is something you have physical control over. You don't have really any control over what's happening in the market, but you can go and improve your property, and you can take a high degree of selectivity and figuring out what you're going to buy and how you're going to pay for it. And there's a lot of decision making around that. And the market is just essentially putting your money in there and hoping it gradually goes up because it's a complicated, or it's really a complex thing, and you just don't have any real control.
Yeah. And I mean, there's no silver bullet. Real estate's not guaranteed to work out either. But like I said, I was just kind of using that to hedge against because, I don't want to be in a situation where I get laid off and then the market also tanks 50%. And then it's okay, well, now I'm actually losing money because I have to use that to live off of. And I'm not going to drain it all, but every time you take out something at a loss, then, you're losing money. And so that was part of the calculus of so we have 3 rental units, and I made sure that when we were getting those, that we were getting something that would just have a instant cash flow. And so, there's going to be vacancies. We haven't had any issues with vacancies with ours, but vacancies will happen. And so you're not always guaranteed that income, but when you do have it, basically the mortgage is pretty much guaranteed. And you're making money off that. And so it's really helpful.
So you spent a lot of time and energy in researching this and making sure that you weren't to minimize the risk.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, the last thing I want to talk about is I do want to dive into what the next few months of your life look like. I know you just got laid off, like literally last week, and you're still feeling your way through this. But like, how much pressure do you have to go out and get a new job so that you have that income coming in? Like, are you in a position where you could coast for a while, or like how serious? And then what are your next few steps if you do want to go ahead and get a new job?
So the main thing is, or like the first deadline is that I actually am wrapping up my last class at UW. So I've been like while I've been working, I've been driving up the past couple of years back and forth.
The University of Washington.
Yep,
Yeah,
University of Washington. So I'm doing my master's in computer science there.
very cool.
And yeah, so I was doing evening classes there, and my cousin works for Amazon, and he lives up there. So I just go stay the night with him. Like I'd go to my class, stay the night at his house, and then I'd go work at Microsoft the next day, and then I'd drive home. Um, but yeah, so I got that wrapping up. I'll probably start job searching soon. I still gotta like fix my resume and everything. But yeah, I'm probably gonna take it a little bit easy, just because I can, and like I've been working so hard both with work and school. Like I'm gonna take as much time to just kind of unplug and be with my family and everything. Because as important as a job is, like there's no bigger job than, being a good husband and partner for my wife and being a father to my two boys. So, that's something that I can't go back and redo. So I'm going to spend a lot of time doing that. Try to run a lot as well. Even though I'm a little bit hobbled right now.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope that heals.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
What advice would you have, like based on your limited experience being laid off? Was this the first time you've been laid off?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, in terms of like things you've already kind of thought through and like planned and stuff, like, what would be your advice to somebody who is just getting laid off today and has like to make that next week a little less painful, a little less ambiguous?
Are you asking in terms of like what to do, or
Yeah.
I mean, I guess okay.
Like
Well, I'll talk about
observations you have,
yeah, what
things like
I'll,
that.
I'll talk a little bit about what to do and also like kind of how to feel. But in terms of what to do, like I don't think it's really any different from any other job search, and I think it's it parallels pretty well to like coming straight out of college because you come out of college and you're also desperate for work. You don't have a job, and you probably have student loans that need to be repaid ASAP, things like that. So like my advice really doesn't change no matter what the circumstances are, and that is that it's really a numbers game. And a lot of people will filter themselves out and won't apply to something because they don't match all the minimum requirements. And like the big thing that I always tell everyone, primarily students, is that like don't filter yourself out. Like if you meet at least 51% of the requirements, apply to it. Apply to everything that you can find, especially if you're in a position where you are kind of desperate or you really need something. Consider things that you wouldn't necessarily consider before, like maybe don't go straight into a job. Maybe go back to school. And when you're applying to jobs, like maybe consider different parts of the country, or maybe even consider different countries. But the main thing is just that, like, I've had a lot of people in the past be like, oh, it's been 6 months. Like I've applied to 50 jobs and I haven't, had any luck. And I'm just like, when I'm looking, like I apply to more than 50 jobs a day. Like 50 over 6 months is nothing. And so like, it's really just about like, in my opinion, just numbers game, just kind of, just no stone left unturned kind of approach. And then also because you don't know like what kind of good things that's going to lead you to when you take up kind of paths or opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have. And then also going into like the kind of how to feel is that just everything in my life has helped prepare me for that. But specifically like the running stuff with the mental toughness, the therapy, so that I'm just in better control of myself and my emotions and how I feel about myself and stuff like that. But the biggest thing is just like no matter what job you have, even if it's the best, I really loved my team and everything and the work that I was doing. The last 4 years at Microsoft were incredible. And they pay very well. Like that was also great. But at the end of the day, a job's a job, and you are not your job. And I think one of the things that kind of grounds me is that like I just view everything, like whether it's literally my existence in my body, whether it's a job, whether it's something else I'm doing, it's like I am just like kind of a steward of this moment. And you know all things have to end at some point. And it sucks that I didn't get to end things on my terms, but that's just the way it goes. um and yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, like it sucks because that's a huge loss of income. Like that's a pretty big impact in the short term. But at the same time, it's like, I've already got so much else that I need to be thankful and grateful for. Um, and as long as I kind of, practice that gratitude, that's always going to make me feel good about things.
Yeah. So you are not your job. It sucks that you lost the income, but you're a steward of this moment. That's everything comes to an end, right? That's just the nature of reality, right? Like I love that steward of the moment observation.
And yeah, I know I feel bad being a little bit kind of glib about it all because, it is serious. Like I know, like I wasn't the only one impacted. Like there's a lot of people that, like you said, weren't prepared, and, they might be really freaking out. And like I haven't been like this the whole past week. Like there's been moments where I've been freaking out a little bit. Less about the immediate impact and more just like the knowing how hard it is to get a job, even when you are skilled and have lots of credentials. The market's tough, especially right now. And then, the interview processes are really, really difficult. They have high standards. So from that aspect, like I'm a little bit, concerned, but, in the long run, like everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, right on. I love your outlook. I love the way that you've spent all this time and energy investing in yourself in terms of, your mental toughness, your physical toughness, understanding yourself, that you've spent a lot of time exercising, thinking about these things. You spend a lot of time in therapy. It really sounds like you've set yourself up to be resilient to these kinds of shocks. And, yeah, I just want to compliment you. I think you're in an incredible position here. And I'm optimistic that even though the job market is tough, and I want to acknowledge when a senior Microsoft dev of your caliber is just getting laid off, that's a bummer. That's extremely value destroying for Microsoft. I'm sure they have their reasons, but it sucks that they no longer have somebody like you in the fold. So
yeah, I mean there was also I don't know if I knew any of them personally, but I mean there's plenty of people even way beyond me that were also impacted.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, I'm optimistic that you're going to hit the ground running. That you're going to get another opportunity when you need to. Like you don't need to hit the ground running. That's the great thing, because you set your entire life up. You've basically built yourself up to this moment to where you have tons of optionality, and that's what I guess financial independence is all about, and that's what having a whole lot of relevant skills is all about, is just having options. So it sounds like you're in a really good place, and you're doing some pro bono work, like you built your wife's speech pathology program. You've helped out some other organizations and things like that, and it sounds like you're putting your time to very good use. And so I just want to thank you for sharing everything so openly, and commend you on being so stoic about the entire process. And yeah, good luck with the job search. We'll be pulling for you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And until next time, everybody out there, keep at it. Happy coding.